Welcome to Clicks and Bricks Podcast. We talk about the entrepreneur mindset.
If you get one shot at this, what kind of shot are you going to take?
If we forget who we are, they're going to forget who you are.
You've got an adversity story that's out of this world.
Everything from that Main Street brick and mortar to that billion-dollar manufacturer.
Welcome back to today's episode of Clicks and Bricks. Today I have Marley Majcher with us. She is the party goddess. We are super excited to learn how she got her business started. How are you doing today, Marley?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us. We are excited to learn about the party goddess, but you're also a book author.
Yes.
Before we get into what you're currently doing, what you're currently working on, can you give us a little bit of background of who Marley is, what your upbringing was? What is it that makes you an entrepreneur?
Well, I guess the definition of, making yourself an entrepreneur is starting a business. And so I started my first one that I can remember was at 4 selling Shrinky Dinks door to door, those little plastic things, you put in the oven. And for some reason at 4, I deemed there was a huge market for them. And I did make sales. So I guess that is definitely the beginning of my entrepreneurial career. I'm sure I made sales because everybody felt sorry for me. But other than that, who's this girl going door to door? But in those days, you could do that, right? And be safe. So I grew up in Pasadena, California, which is a home of the Rose Bowl, suburb of Los Angeles. And I've always had businesses. I was always obsessed with business. That was all I have ever wanted to do, is to be in business. And actually, I wrote a book when I was 13, a freshman in high school, about gift wrapping, that I put together with one of my babysitting client, like the mom of one of my babysitting clients who was in printing. And then I went off to Georgetown and I got my business degree from there. And so far it sounds very rosy. My upbringing was like my dad worked and my mom stayed home. And, I'm sure at the time, of course, I didn't appreciate it. Now I'm like, I need a mom to stand with me right now, right? And my poor kids who have me working and traveling all the time, it's a totally different story. But I had the benefit of that. And then I went to Georgetown, and Georgetown at the time was looking for women who had demonstrated business ability. And that was one thing I had, because otherwise there's not a chance I would have gotten in. And so I went to Georgetown, and then kind of the big watershed moment that relates to this is that it was before my junior year, and it was the summer before my junior year. And I was like, I don't know what I want, to do for the summer. Just nothing appealed to me. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go to cooking school in Paris. So I decided to go to cooking school in Paris, and I came back from the summer and happened to run into my professor. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited. We had this class and I had to do a speech on what I knew more about than anybody else. And at Georgetown, I was like, that is absolutely nothing. And my mom is like, why don't you do it on French cooking, right? Like, you just came back from France. Nobody's going to know more about French cooking. And I was like, okay, no worries. So, but I told her I had an interview with the chef from 1789. And for any of you who are familiar with DC, 1789 is like a really fancy restaurant. And I did not have an interview, nor had I ever thought of having an interview. So I was like, and then she's like, oh my God, this is the greatest. Like, that's my favorite restaurant, blah, blah, blah. And I go home and I'm saying, oh my gosh, like, what am I going to do now? So I say to my roommates, I just told my professor this, blah, blah, blah. And they said, don't worry, there's a new chef and he is from New York. And so they're like, we can get you an interview. And I was like, all I need is an interview. I don't care about anything else. So I go to interview him, and I take one look at him, and I decide I need to marry him. And that is a lot for so many reasons, but without getting into too many details, I was 19 at the time. He was 20 years older. He's working in this restaurant. I don't even know anything really about him. And here I am, I need to marry him. So the whole time I'm doing my interview, I'm sitting there going, oh my gosh, how am I going to marry this guy? And so I decided that the easiest way to do that is to start working there. So I kind of say I need to go back and have a little bit more, maybe for my interview, like some hands-on experience. And so he's like, whatever. So I go back, and then I proceeded to get myself a job, and I would go to work every day from 3:30 to 11:30. Well, 3 days a week from 3:30 to 11:30, and I would get out of school at 2:30. My parents are like, absolutely appalled. And they're like, your grades aren't the greatest to start with. It was the only time I made the dean's list, by the way. And I was just like, okay, this is my goal. So then, but he never asked me out. So obviously even though I was a marketing major, I was not marketing myself very well. So the summer before my senior year, I'm like, okay, what am I going to do this summer? Since obviously I'm not married, etc. So I decided I'm going to go to Normandy to cooking school this summer. And so I go to Normandy, and then I plot the whole summer, as vengeful women do, how I'm going to break up with him and like ruin his life. Because obviously at this point, I'm the most stable employee. If you can imagine, I'm picking up every single shift ever because, I want to marry him. So I come back from cooking school, and then I'm like, okay. And I tell him, listen, it's my senior year. I've got too much going on. And he's like, okay, I totally get it. Did you want to have dinner? And I was like, yeah. And really? Okay. So took forever in my opinion. But then the month after graduation, I got engaged. And then what do you do when you marry a chef who's 20 years older than you? You come back and you open a restaurant. So we came back to Pasadena, and my whole goal was to start a restaurant. But my big deal was to have $1 million in sales. That was always my, like, in business school, you're like goals. So I did my first $1 million in sales, and, I had, from the outside, my life looked very perfect. And, here I had this $1 million in sales, and I was getting all this press coverage, and here I was young and married to this super chef and the whole deal. But what my dirty little secret was that I had a very difficult time translating what I learned in business school at Georgetown into real life, such as, like how to review your profit and loss statement and actually like make money. I mean, I was certainly looking at my profit and loss statement. I knew how to read it, but I just could not. It was all these practical things about being a business owner, like that you don't hire your best friend, which I did, that you don't, you have to hire people for their skill sets as opposed to just because you like them. You need to do really great background checks, all these things that I just failed at miserably because I was, 21 years old when I started. So the long story short of that is, when you're doing $1 million in sales, that's awesome. I hit the goal. But then if you're spending 1.1, forget it. You got a big problem. So I continued, thought, okay, listen, so now what am I going to do? Like so many entrepreneurs, I'm like, I am going, let's take over a banquet operation. Let's start a catering company, right? You think like, let's just expand into some other areas of just to get other revenue streams. And all that did was just split my attention. Well, now, being in business with your husband in the first place is very challenging. Being 20 years old, like I never even had a boyfriend. Now I have a husband, and then I'm like, okay, this is a hot mess. We're having all this financial trouble. I don't want to admit it. What do I do? The world thinks I'm perfect. I know I'm a hot mess. So I'm like, okay, think what's the answer? So I decide, okay, I'm just going to have a baby because that'll fix it. And so I have a baby. And then now the baby in front of the cappuccino machine, like, because, of course I'm still working 24 hours a day, but the baby's crying, right? So I was like, okay, it's noisy, it's free, there's something. Well, time keeps going. Financial trouble is not great for romance, even though we managed to have a baby. And then I have a very bad skiing accident. And with my bad skiing accident, I am now in, like, I tear my ACL, crush my tibia. I'm in like a full brace, rehab, the whole deal. And thank goodness we own the land where the restaurant was. And so my dad is like, listen, this is ridiculous. Like, how many strikes do you need against you? He's like, we keep getting these offers to partner up. Why don't you partner up? You love the events anyway. But I just didn't want to do that because I felt like I had failed, which, I mean, I had failed in many ways, but I just was like, ugh. And so anyway, long story short, we cut the deal. And then I went off and was like at the lowest point in my life and just going, okay, now what? And then I decided, alrighty, well, I do love the events, so I'm going to start an event planning company. And in those days, you didn't have, like, large companies had event, like other large companies would hire event planning companies, right? The rest of us would just hire, like the caterer and the florist and all that kind of stuff. So I thought, okay, I'm going to hang out my shingle, and I needed a name. And I thought, what's like the biggest go big or go home name I could think of? And I was like, the Party Goddess. which was so pathetic considering
Right.
I was like, the party tanker at the moment. But so I started the Party Goddess, and that was great. Now I'm one of 5 billion party planners in the world. No way to really distinguish myself.
Right.
And not making any money. So my dad, now I'm got another husband, and my dad is like, I'm telling him, oh yes, and we're doing this and we're doing this. And my dad is like, I don't care, but are you making any money? Like, because he's just like, this is the point of a business. Like, if you want a hobby, have a hobby. If you want to work for a nonprofit and be a nonprofit, be a nonprofit. But the difference is making money. That's what a business does. And I just at that point decided I am done with my story, and I'm not going to tell the story anymore. I'm not going to take my deposits and go to Neiman Marcus. I'm going to like run a real business, and I'm going to figure it out. And then that's how I ended up writing my book, But Are You Making Any Money? After my dad and little ADHD girl here decided, you know what, even though I hated numbers for so long, I came up with my little system of how to actually make money in any business, whether it's service or products or whatever.
Wonderful. That is a long and twisting road to get where you're at, which I think most roads are that way, right? Especially in
Yes.
business. I think it's great. Most entrepreneurs that I talk to start super young, right? 4 years old selling Shrinky Dinks, I think is absolutely
Do I
amazing.
get the record?
You what's that?
Do
4?
I get the record?
I don't know. I'll have to go back and check the episodes, but Shrinky Dinks, I've not heard that yet. And I think
Oh,
that's
good. Okay, well, that's good. I have a record there.
and I think you probably were selling cuteness at the time, not really selling
Oh,
Shrinky Dinks.
I was trying.
Yeah.
I mean, I was trying very much.
Wonderful.
Not succeeding particularly, but
So your first restaurant, you get it up, and in your head, I've fallen victim to this trap as well, right? When you're young, you set this mindset of, oh, if I could just make $100,000 a year,
Right.
the world would be great. If I could just make a
Right.
business that makes $1 million a year,
right.
the world would be great. And you've found yourself in a position where you have $1 million revenue, and you've got some friends as line cooks, and you've got maybe an accountant and all these things, but you're just not,
Yeah.
you're not seeming to make any money, or the money that
Right.
you could make more just with the regular job, right? Working for somebody else in a lot
Well,
of
that's what-
cases.
In my book, I call that the McDonald's moment, when I, finally did the math and realized, oh my gosh, I would literally be making more money working at McDonald's, and I
Wow.
would have a free shift meal, and I wouldn't have to go to McDonald's because I was so stressed out, So it was a totally different deal. But the real takeaway is, it doesn't matter if you're creative. It doesn't matter. You have to set up your business from the very beginning with a plan for your pricing, your cost of goods sold if you have a product, and if you're a service, the most important thing really to any entrepreneurial adventure to me is time. And you have to know how much time you're spending in each of your categories, like getting clients, like we think, oh, I spend an hour with the coaching client, and then, yeah, but how much time do you spend like getting the coaching client? How much time do you spend prepping the call for the coaching client and rescheduling and blah, 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 all those things?
It's amazing to me how many business owners I talk to that don't know how long their sales cycle is for their product, or don't know, how many deals they need to have in the prospect stage to turn that into revenue. So the lack of KPIs, I think, in small business owners is just a horrible thing. And if business owners just implement some basic fundamental KPIs, key performance indicators, they can change their business quite a bit. I want to talk about that moment, though, when you knew how to read a P&L, and you're running $1 million restaurant, but you're not making any money because you're working 80, 100 hours a week, and you're, when you do the math, I think one month I made like $6 an hour, right? Because the amount of hours that I worked was just
You beat
absurd.
me. I was making less than 5, so.
So can you tell us, when you saw that P&L, did you close the restaurant, or were you looking for places to push, or did you find places to push, or did you just have to walk away from the restaurant altogether?
No, we thank God, because we owned the land, so we partnered up. We were and it turned out to be the greatest business decision we ever made, because I still own the land. I'm still the landlord. It's long been paid off. The mortgage has long been paid off, and it just goes to show you how the worst, and that was the worst in my mind, the worst thing that could have ever happened to me turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me. Not only because it like unleashed me creatively to do what I love to do, which is events, but and then go write a business book and all these other, kind of roads. But no, I was not, and that's one thing I would not have just, well, I don't think I would have just stopped. I was like, we put in so much money, blood, sweat, and tears. I was like, there was going to be a plan here. Now, it took a long time for it to pay me back, but.
Right. So I want to go back to a statement that you said before, and I don't want to put you too much on the spot, but I'm gonna bust you a little bit on it.
Put myself on the spot.
You had said that when you first start the business, it's important to really understand what products and services you're going to offer.
Right.
But as most business owners that I've talked to, just like you had to make some pretty substantial pivot along. Yep. You were wrong, right? And right. Frequently we're wrong with our first guess on what the market's going to want or things like that.
Right.
When you found the confidence to make that change, and it's a pretty significant change, was there like one beacon of, hey, this is the way that I have to go, or was it, hey, we're going to try that? Were you trying a bunch of different things, or did you put all your eggs in this basket?
Well, before we decided to partner up with this other restaurant group, I was trying a million things. I was like, okay, if we take over this banquet operation, this will be awesome, right? Because then we've already got the kitchen staff, and then we'll have the revenue from that, and then we'll have extra office space and all these things. But all that did was just divide our energy. Right. And so then I was like, okay, so we start the off-premise catering company. Again, same thing. We've got the catering staff. We've got the, it'll just be another source of revenue. And then we can have, up our takeout business. There were plenty of other successful places around that had done that. And I thought, okay, this is great. So you start throwing more mud at the wall, right? But what that does is that just can make your mud go down the hill faster, because you are now really split in your focus. And now it's effectively like I had 3 P&Ls to run, right? Right. Now your numbers are sort of convoluted, because it's one thing to know what your cost of goods sold for a chicken salad that you're serving in the dining room is. Now you're trying to figure out what is it when you've got a banquet operation, and oh, by the way, that same chicken salad has a totally different cost if it's to go or even catering. So all I did was create more of a mess. Now, I didn't know that at the time. The big picture of creating that mess was that I cut my teeth on catering and everything else, and then, parlayed it into a successful business. But I think that the key piece is, which is you've talked about in so many of your podcasts, is, failure is a huge part of it. It's just an intrinsic part of it. And the idea is to fail, let's say, in a part of the business or in the business as a whole that is not so huge that it takes down, your entire ship, right? It's just, It's much better to be like, okay, it's kind of like, I can afford to lose these chips if I'm gambling then not have to worry about paying my mortgage,
Yeah, you want to avoid putting all your chips on the table. If you can, sometimes you have to make those big bets, right? And have faith that you can pull it off. And those are the scary, scary, scary moments. Well, congratulations on this journey that you've been on and getting to where you're at.
Thank you.
If somebody wanted to learn more about you specifically, where would they find more about you?
Well, the easiest, if they want the party stuff, that's easy. Instagram, it's at the Party Goddess.
Okay.
The book is on Amazon, but Are You Making Any Money? And if they want to kind of go through a little bit of what I talk about in the book totally for free, we have a whole little video, free video series, which is available at mini.theprofitgoddess.com. And that's kind of a way where they can just get these little snippets about introducing them to how to track your time and why you've got to track your time and why it's so important and all that.
Wonderful. So a little bit of a giveaway for people starting there. And that book is for people that are in business that are just struggling. They haven't overcome that hurdle yet of making the kind of money that they want to make.
Well, hopefully it's the best case scenarios. It's for people who are thinking of starting a business and haven't yet started. But then, of course, yeah, it's definitely for people who are in the midst of it. But the other thing too is I've gotten a lot of feedback from like large company owners because they're like, oh my gosh, I want my people to read this.
Okay.
Because you have the people read it and they're the ones actually implementing, the cost of goods sold and doing all that stuff. So they realize how important their time is.
Right. Absolutely. Wonderful. I love it. It is all great stuff. Now, big transitions, big moves throughout this whole journey. Nice restaurant. Now you're catering parties and doing all this other stuff. But you've landed some pretty epic clients.
Yes.
From what I'm reading on the bios for your parties.
Yes.
Can you share with us some of these people that you've ended up planning parties?
Oh, sure. Well, one that's in the news right now, Britney Spears, Sofia Vergara, Snoop Dogg, Pierce Brosnan, who, yes, is really that good looking in person. I mean, God, it goes Gwyneth Paltrow. It just goes on. And the piece of that, how that came about, because I have a feeling that might be one of your next questions, is because there were so many event planners and I had no distinct advantage. I was really good at what I did, but just like a lot of other entrepreneurs, you're out there and you're just screaming into the wind, right? Because nobody really knows you exist. And so it's like you have to have something that says, hey, listen, this is why I stand apart from the crowd. And this is my secret sauce. And so I figured, well, if I can interview a chef and marry him, I should be able to figure out how to get me a celebrity, which I did. And that really changed my life.
Did you get a celebrity to book a party with you, or did you get a celebrity to marry you?
Not to marry me yet. I have not. I'm between husbands at the moment. So if there are any celebrities out there that are, looking for a very smart, successful whatever I am, then yeah, no. But what I did was I was like, okay, if I can get one celebrity, like even a D-list celebrity, then I figured, okay, maybe it would be word of mouth. Like, okay, then I would get this celebrity, or maybe I'd work with their agent, and then then the agent would refer me. And it took me a really long time to swallow this pill because I knew I wanted to just be like famous and fabulous and rich based on my own accomplishments, as opposed to having to have this grand marketing strategy to pull it off. And in reality, a little bit, I sold my soul. I was like, yeah, I am really good at what I do, but if I can't get in the magazines and I can't get in it's going to take me a lot longer.
Right.
And the easiest way to get in magazines is to have celebrity clients.
Yes. So who was the first celebrity client that you got?
I'm trying to think who the very first one of the very early ones was Leona Lewis.
Okay.
I remember that. One of quite frankly, it didn't take me that long to get Britney Spears. And I'm not, and you know what, in hindsight, probably the reason, and this is a great marketing tip for people, is the best marketing and business collaborations, et cetera, when it's win-win, right? Okay. And so Britney was having a tough time then, like she a little bit is now. And it was one of those things where she was, her kids were younger. She was having a lot of issues in the press. And it made sense to reach out to her team and be like, hey, let's throw a birthday party for the boys, right? Because if we throw a birthday party for the boys, that's going to put you in good light. It's going to get you some positive press, et cetera, et cetera. Well, what it did was it gave both of us a ton of positive press. So it could have gone one way, which would have been me, the ambulance chaser, like selling her out, which I never did. But instead, it elevated both of our brands. And so the thing for business owners, if you can find a company that's in the news, and these days in the news can be on TikTok, it can be anywhere, right? And they're struggling with XYZ, and you show up and say, hey, listen, I've got this. I mean, it's kind of the whole influencer game, right? Where you're like, hey, you have a big audience. You like makeup. Okay, you talk about you've got dark circles. I'm gonna send you my concealer. Will you blog about? Will you post about it? And that really changed the trajectory of my life because it opened so many doors.
Yes, and that kind of job would. So
Definitely.
out there today, I am positive there's young men and women that have an idea and a concept, and
Yes.
that was several years ago. I'm assuming that you landed the Britney Spears job,
Yes.
that first one.
Yes.
And social media has come a long way since then.
Yes.
Like literally, you can take some of your celebrities and just start IMing them and get in contact with them today, which was a lot more challenging back then. Somebody has a concept and they're like, man, I really want to reach out to a celebrity today to try to, I've got this idea for them, but something in their head keeps saying they'll never listen to me. They'll never, who am I to make this presentation to these celebrities? What do you say to that person to give them the confidence to just try?
Can I curse on the program?
Yeah.
I would
PG-13.
Yeah. Okay. So I'd say baloney. I mean, listen, I literally how I did it was I started saying to my friends, okay, I'm going to get a celebrity client. And they're like, how? And I was like, well, I mean, I don't know. But I think if you write it down and you write your goals out and then you come up with a strategy, I didn't get it the first minute. I had to talk to a lot of my friends, but then one of my friends turned out she was a publicist and she's like, oh, I'm doing this thing. And that got me to this. I call it corridor thinking, where you have a goal at the end and then you just start getting closer and closer. You can call it manifesting. You can call it goal setting. You can call it so many things, right?
Right.
But what I would say is, first of all, which is what I say to my coaching clients too, you don't know what anybody's going to do, right? So freaking just get rid of it. I mean, you've done a lot of stuff on your podcast about the self-talk. Just get over it. Now, if you don't have a great product or you don't have a great service, that's a completely different scenario. But if you've got a unique product and a unique service, you've got a good pitch, you solve a problem, you can get it into the celebrity, make it easy for them to do business with you. I say, why not? I mean, I wouldn't spend $1 million on the pitch per celebrity, you know what I mean? But I would be like, okay. And I would start researching like what's worked in the past. What is it and really know them. Just like if you're pitching to, a TV producer or something, you got to watch the show. What kind of stuff do they put on the show?
Right.
Same thing for celebrities. What did they like? Do they drink or are they like, they're former alcoholic and they drink 2 tons of water or something, and you're a water brand or there are so many ways.
Right.
And these days it's so you're right, it's so much easier, but you've got to really know who's your target audience, and then so who would be the celebrities that would relate to that audience. But the other thing too is you don't have to just go like, oh, I'm going to pitch Brad Pitt. The other thing you can do too is pitch like the celebrity of your town. Right. Meaning maybe it's just the local newscaster. Maybe it's just a local whoever that has a lot more social media followers than you have, and you start with a collaboration. So kind of lily pad it. You don't have to go from stair 1 to stair 100. Just go from here, just incrementally.
Yes, and try not to skip steps. Just go through them and enjoy the steps. Right, that's so important.
Yeah.
On the topic, you said if you've got a bad product or service. And I would say, as long as you love what your product or service is, you'll figure it out, right? Because you'll have the tenacity to stick with it and keep chugging through and sanding those edges off. And
that's the key word is tenacity. And somehow I think in Insta world and TikTok and by the way, all of which I'm a part of, and I love it. It's still, the most successful, even if they're just like, oh, they have 1 million followers on TikTok and they still spend 2 tons of time making content on TikTok, right? That is their passion, and they have the tenacity, and they are commenting if it's on Instagram, and they are liking, and they have strategies, and they're doing collaborations, and I guarantee you they are working very hard at it. I have yet to meet somebody who is very successful, who is not a trust funder, who did anything without 2 tons of tenacity. So if it feels like hard work, you're right, it is. And that's that.
Absolutely. And I hate the narrative that today's youth is lazy and they don't put in the work, because the work that they're putting in, the young entrepreneurs today, it's not unequivalent to what we were doing 20 years ago when we were starting businesses. It's different, but the amount of effort and energy that they're putting into it is still substantial. I would say it's almost more challenging today because you've got all the platforms to choose from, right? When I started my first business, I had the yellow pages, right? I started at A, and I just went down the list.
Yeah, exactly. Dude, join the crowd, you know, like, you know, so the yellow pages are your like, you know, for celebrities, you're like, okay, the star bus, I'll follow the star bus and get the outdated star map. And oh yeah, Farrah Fawcett lived here 4 years ago. By the way, she's dead now. I mean, it's a totally different thing. So it's easier, but it still takes the tenacity, but you do have the access.
Right. Absolutely. So Marley, you are a woman that obviously sees what she wants and goes after it and generally gets it.
Much to my demise at times.
Is what it seems like. Through this journey, has there been something that happened in the business that you were just absolutely shocked by? You did not see this, anticipate this coming, and that you're just beside yourself with, that you had to overcome?
I mean, how many stories do you want?
Just a good one.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you one great one that was a real turning point in my life and business, and on so many levels, because I talk about the bleed. I think there's a bleed between, you know, as an entrepreneur, you don't really have a personal life and a business life, right? They sort of just bleed and blend together. And so one is not doing well, the other one tends not to do well. Well, I was referred to a client and by a friend, and it's like they knew him well, blah blah blah. They were getting married, was prepping their wedding. In hindsight, I can see that I was basically set up, but that's okay. And my contract was not tight enough, and they kept giving me all kinds of excuses, and I knew something was wrong, but I was so outgained. One of them was a lawyer, and it goes back to, you know, when you've got to get your contract signed and your retainer signed or your retainer paid, and boom, boom, boom. And there's a reason why lawyers don't lift a finger until they are retained, signed, sealed, and delivered, and with a tight contract. If you don't have a tight contract, you better invest some money in a tight contract, because not only did these people sue me and harangue me and make my life a living hell, which was mind-blowing to me, because in my world, you just wouldn't do that just because the friend referred you, right?
Right.
And what I found out later was that the bride was gaming the groom. She's spending all this money that she wasn't telling him about, so she's approving it. And then, I'll get it signed, I'll get it, blah, 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 and all these games. And then not only did I get sued, but I had huge legal bills. But the most important thing was that it really gutted me, because I was married at the time, and my husband was just like, which I understand, you know, my husband at the time wasn't an entrepreneur. So he was just like, how could you do this to us? Like, how could you expose us to this risk? And it was like all those, how could you just, and I was like, how could I just, like, my lawyer did my contract. Like, I have an S corp that I'm running my business out of. We have a trust so that, you know, blah, 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 blah. But there were just still so many places where I could get creamed, and I did, and it was a very expensive financial lesson, but it also made me become a real tough
Yes.
I'm not going to say the word, because you just are like, I love you so much, I'm sure it's all going to be good, but you got to sign the contract. Yes. And we got to have a deposit, you know?
Absolutely. It's tough. And my experience, lawyers are necessary evil in life.
Yeah.
doing business with them, like if they're the landlord or they're the client, is really, really challenging because they are law first and they're not relationship first. So, and they like to solve things through the courts, which is my advice is stay away from the courts with every ounce of energy you possibly have in your being, because it will suck the life out of you if you end up in that boat.
It sure will.
It is absolutely a horrible situation. I'm sorry that you had to go through that, but you learned a lot. And another important thing, like just because you have your S Corp and your LLC and you got your trust does not prevent people from suing you directly.
Absolutely
they're not
If
supposed to be
people
able
think
to, and you are protected, and it will all come out in the wash. But if they decide to file suit against you personally, it ties up your personal finances. You can't get loans, you can't refinance, you can't do all that stuff. It is, I think it's a shady practice. It's happened to me in the past, and I didn't like it. I wouldn't do it to somebody else. But
well, the other component too is that I learned, unfortunately, the hard way, is that you're not necessarily totally protected by your corporate coverage, because they can find, which is very easy to find, loopholes about how you pierce the corporate veil.
Right.
And then game on. Then they really can go after your personal assets, because if they can prove that you really weren't behaving with all the things that you have to do to maintain a corporate status, you really are toast.
Absolutely. And actually, in this episode, I'll put a link in the bottom to some of our legal resources that we recommend people
That'd be
to.
awesome for people.
So I'm not a lawyer. I'm not making any recommendations on what you should do other than talk to a lawyer about all of your legal needs.
And a good one.
And a good one that knows business, that can write those contracts for you and all that stuff. It is.
Yeah.
It's my least favorite thing to do, but it is wildly important, and it will save your butt in the long run. If you're going to do business for any period of time, you're going to have misunderstandings.
Very graciously put. Very PG. That was a very G-rated, in fact.
So, well, I mean, everybody's got their difference of opinions, right?
Right.
It just is what it is. So,
yep.
I am super excited for you and your progress up until this point. What should we expect from you next?
Well, I'm going into ranching. So I got a bug in my bonnet, and I bought a 20-acre ranch last year. And it does relate, believe it or not, to everything I'm doing. So I'm building this house all out of shipping containers and barns out of shipping containers. And it's in Central California, and I am knee deep in it as we speak, and very overloaded in terms of the learning curve is extremely high, but I love it. And so you will see me in a cowboy hat soon. How's that?
What kind of ranch? Are you going to raise animals, or are you going to have big
Well,
parties out there?
I already have some, and then what I'm doing now is I have this whole kind of algorithm going about what plants or flowers or whatever I'm going to raise. So I have it narrowed down to 3 that kind of meet my criterion and where I think the market is going. And and I'm working on a patent with something for sheep. So it's so random, but
I love it. Yeah. You find a problem, you find a solution for it, you figure out how to market it. That's what we do. So wonderful.
Exactly.
Marley, I've had such a great time talking with you today. Thank you for your time. We very much appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Is there anything you would like to leave the audience with before we go?
Just if this is a bad day for you, know that it will get better. No matter what, this is your sign that it will get better, and just keep showing up, because believe me, you could not have been at rock bottom any lower than I have been. And then you end up in a yellow office and becoming a rancher. So you can do it.
I love it. I like to tell people that I've not only hit rock bottom, I dragged there for several years.
Right, exactly.
Before I found the energy to push myself up. So again, thank you so much for your time. I very much appreciate it. And I can't wait to talk to you again. Thanks for watching today's episode of Clicks and Bricks. Get to work.